Welcome to Google Ads Unleashed, the podcast that helps you harness the power of Google Ads. And now your host, Jeremy Young.
This week, something happened which I didn't think I'm going to see for a little while, but it is finally here. A client of mine sent me a forensic audit of their own ad account, 2 years of data, change history, root cause analysis, and everything. AI is supposedly taking our jobs, and for a while I was scared because when smart shopping came out, everyone was scared. When automated bid strategies were rolled out, everyone was scared. But this week has solidified me much more that for at least the next few years, you will need someone who actually knows marketing, who can think, and who has absolute pathological knowledge of Google Ads as a platform. What has happened exactly and what you should be doing when you want to do your own AI audits or get faced with such audits, I'll talk about this in this week's episode. Welcome back to Google Ads Unleashed, guys. Hope everyone is doing fabulously this Monday. Client has sent me a full audit AI generated of their ad account this week and wanted me to talk about it. And this is going to happen much more because everyone has now a tool at their disposal, whether it's Claude, ChatGPT, if you do a bit of hooking up, etc., that can read your ad account, write reports, do maybe even changes, suggestions, etc. And a lot of Google Ads experts are worried about this. I see it as an opportunity, at least for the next few years. Probably AI is going to get better and better and better, and will do more of the doing further down the line. But for now, it sort of solidifies one kind of takeaway for me, and that is you still have to do the thinking. Today I'm going to tell you about exactly what happened, what the audit got right, what the audit got wrong, and what you should be doing when you're faced with this, or if you're generating one, how you should interpret it. So to be fair, the audit that I actually got was really carefully done. It flagged its own confidence levels, it said what the data couldn't access, even admitted that some of the APIs it was connected with was either with the wrong account or it had several accounts in there. But here is where things go wrong. Like, for instance, this client is super clever. I love him a lot. He's actually very good friends of ours as well. However, the issue is that he starts to have overconfidence in the AI. And potentially I think he's very aware of that, but it is sometimes then extremely hard to argue against that when people are so deep in the narrative, because that is what the AI does really good. It paints a fantastic sort of narrative based on the data that it can see. Because what the AI is really good is it caught a couple of things. So for instance, it caught a conversion tracking inversion. Google over-reported some lead data for about between 5 to 15% for over about 3 years, which in the grand scheme of things wasn't actually that bad. It was just one conversion action that was duplicated. But since we've actually fixed the conversion tracking, I had an expert looking over this a few months ago, this has actually now flipped to minus 19% underreporting, which of course means that we are now not feeding the algorithm enough data. So this is a great prompt. So to us, this is something that a human reviewing monthly numbers could never really catch, to be honest. It's really hard. You only see this if you plot the ratio across 30 plus months, or if you have any sort of suspicion that anything was even done wrongly. We hired a tracking guy, paid him for this, and we would have thought that it would have fixed the data. That being said, we used to also track different conversion actions and also had other campaigns live. For instance, a brand campaign, which we don't even have live anymore, meaning that we used to have a lot more conversions that we track because they were branded conversions, for instance. Now we don't. And this is where it gets right. It sees this and then it prompts you to ask the right questions, but it doesn't have the context that I have and understands that a campaign is, for instance, branded versus non-branded. And this could also be the cause for the reporting of the data. It's also super great at talking like getting stories and changes right. So it's more or less like a research assistant that builds a timeline and sort of tells you a sort of consecutive sort of story of different events that we happened and undertook in the ad account. So overall, though, it has one big flaw, though, that it can only access the data and do something with the data that it doesn't actually, and it can only do a story with the data that it sees, because what it got massively wrong is that it used all of those account artifacts as actual proof of the market. So for instance, one thing that it said is that because impressions were up 47% year on year, it said that with high confidence, by the way, whilst it also admitting that it had actually no search volume data about the market, whether there's been a demand softening or a demand strengthening, that as impressions were up 47% year on year, it could not be a competition issue, because if there were competitors in the market, impressions would be down. Well, what actually happened is that a competitor entered the market in November, causing significant pressure on, first of all, the SQL ratio that we've been tracking. So in fact, since then already, lead quality had dropped slightly, which was back in November and in December also. But also what had happened is, with a maybe slight underreporting, which I've just mentioned, and this competitor pressure, which if you would check the auction insights, which it didn't, you would see, then you would probably realize that PMax has put a lot of, which by the way, I've done an episode on this. This is a very rare event where we're actually using PMax in a lead gen account. Listen to it. There's a very good reason to it for this, where PMax is then pushing the budget into lower value placements because it's not been able to compete at the target CPA with the competitor that I've mentioned, which causes impressions to rise. So in fact, it made the wrong conclusion from just the data that it saw, because it has no idea about auction insight and it doesn't have an idea about any of the outside data of the business and the real things that had happened. It also sort of miscorrelated a couple of things. So for instance, we had a couple of campaigns that we launched on a new domain within the same ad account. The related domains is a very long story, but we launched those on max click, so it correlated that with poor quality data or broad traffic that would go to bad leads, although the one thing didn't really have anything to do with the other. And I think what all of this does, it just paints a story of correlation, which actually isn't causation, and it says that as matter of fact. So for instance, certain things that happened in the same month are just causated to have caused an outcome which doesn't actually really happen. Or for instance, some of the things that it said that might cause a drop in lead quality or something like that. It acknowledged that this happened earlier. Nevertheless, it still said that, increase in budget on PMax, for instance, caused this. So what has sort of stood out to me when this happened is that AI is really, really good for the timeline and the questions that you should be asking, but it's really, really poor for the conclusions that you can draw from it. So when you get presented with something like that, or if you're running it yourself, you should really ask yourself on every causal claim that it makes, is there something that the AI can't see? Is it, for instance, some data that it doesn't have? Maybe you can even still feed it the data afterwards and refine your audit, right? If you're worrying that, hey, this doesn't really make sense. Or maybe it doesn't see seasonality, which you could feed the data. Maybe use, for instance, Google Trends or something else, or download Google Trends data and feed it that. It may not see the offer. For instance, the competitor had a quite compelling offer and a different way of displaying basically information to a lead that may or may not actually entice that lead to convert. It didn't really see that, right? It also has no idea about the sales team. Is the sales team good? Has there been an issue within the team? Has there been an issue within the market, etc., etc.? So whilst it prompts you to ask good questions and the right questions, and whilst you want to validate those and actually acknowledge them, you really have to be very wary of some of the oversimplifications that it makes, because AI does the sort of grunt work. It repaints the story of all the changes and everything and builds that into a narrative. But you, as the expert, have to be the layer on top of the tool that actually makes sense of the data, because that is where AI still is going wrong, in my opinion. And I think you can only fix that by adding more context, or by being the piece of context that it needs in order to make sense from it. So what do I make of this audit? So like I said, it painted a really good picture and retraced a lot of things, but it got every correlation and causation completely wrong because it didn't actually know what was going on. It got every observation right, but almost every cause wrong. And this is kind of the essence of this whole podcast and this lesson. The AI narrows the search space, and the strategist still has to do the thinking and activate his brain or her brain in order to make sense of what it reads. And this is how we operate at Y&D, right? Don't just sort of swallow the AI slop, but rather we make sense of what is actually going on in there. We make sense of what's going on in your business. We make sense of you. We make sense of what's going on in the market. And this is the foundation that drives us to make the right decisions for ad accounts and for the businesses that we work with. And if you're unsure about your situation right now and need a little help, just get in touch, Jeremy and Google Ads. You can also go to my website, younganddigital.marketing, which will be redone in the next few weeks. So it'll have a new lick of paint on it, which is nice. You can book a call with me there. And you can also just send me an email at jeremy@younganddigital.marketing. This has been Jeremy Young, your personal Google Ads expert, and wish you a happy and productive week ahead.
Thank you for listening to Google Ads Unleashed. To connect with Jeremy, check him out online at www.younganddigital.marketing. We'll see you next time.